Since the dawn of man, humanity has been suffering from an inherent quality of ours. Violence and loneliness has plagued the human condition, preventing us from forming meaningful connections and reaching our full potential. A mysterious group, represented by monoliths, decide that this condition needs to be done with, and that humanity needs to evolve past this inherent condition. They chose a certain individual to be the catalyst of this new step forward. This individual makes contact with God, and himself becomes a godlike being to end the suffering of humans. So what piece of media did I just describe? Well, I just described two. 2001: A Space Odyssey and Neon Genesis Evangelion are both iconic pieces of media, and both are considered as one of the greatest literature of their respective mediums. However, as somebody who has recently watched both, I've realized that the similarities between these two media are a bit too close to be written off as coincidence. Now, I'm not the first to notice these similarities. There's an entire page dedicated to visual references to 2001 within Evangelion. The most notable reference are the Sele monoliths being a direct reference to the godlike monoliths of 2001. There are also more references, with the shot of the moon, earth, and sun in alignment being a prominent shot in both media. However, I do believe that these similarities transcend just visual callbacks. I believe that Evangelion is, in a way, a retelling of 2001: A Space Odyssey. The themes and events of both stories are way too similar for me to think otherwise. In this video, we will be comparing the events of these two stories and how their themes match up. Now, the first question that comes to our mind is, did Hideaki Anno, director of Evangelion, make Evangelion with the intention of it being a retelling of 2001? After all, 2001 is one of the greatest films of all time, and many works were inspired by it. Well, we can actually answer this question. In an interview conducted by Richard Rowland, he asks Anno if he was inspired by Stanley Kubrick, the legendary director of 2001, as both he and Anno share similar directing tricks, such as the ironic use of classical music and similar camera angles. Anno responded, quote, "I like 2001: A Space Odyssey, but probably haven't been influenced that much. I've been influenced by everything I've seen, experienced, and learned. That even includes my childhood hobbies, the scenery of my hometown, and the books I've read. So that does it, right? Evangelion isn't a retelling of 2001, video's over." But I'm going to invoke something called Death of the Author. Death of the Author is a notion saying that the intent of the author or creator of a work is irrelevant for an interpretation of the work. The work exists on its own, and it doesn't matter what the author intended for it to mean. If you can find an interpretation of the work that wasn't intended by the author, that interpretation is completely valid. This is basically the reason why your English teacher makes you analyze every part of a book you're reading. Even small random details you're sure meant nothing when the author wrote it. But today, we're going to be using Death of the Author to prove that Evangelion is a retelling of 2001. We're going to be looking at the major plot points and themes of 2001, and show how those are mirrored within Evangelion to form a narrative which is the same as 2001, albeit with a twist that alters the underlying message of the whole work. Of course, this means that I will be talking about the entirety of 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Evangelion TV show from 1995, and the End of Evangelion film from 1997, and I recommend that you watch all of them before watching this video, because it will allow you to better understand the points I'm making in this video. Of course, you can watch this video without watching those media, but you will be spoiled, and you won't be able to appreciate the video as much. So, with that out of the way, let's get into the video. This is why Evangelion and 2001: A Space Odyssey are the same story. "2001: A Space Odyssey starts with a sequence titled The Dawn of Man. It follows a group of apes as they try and survive the harsh landscape of their Earth. Throughout their day, they try and find resources and sustenance to survive. The apes of this time were vegetarians, and they try to scrounge up whatever grass and shrubs they can find, while sharing this food with the peers they live alongside with. Obviously, this is not enough food for the apes. They also have to try and find enough water for themselves. They find a watering hole, but another group of apes arrive and start to contest the watering hole. However, the conflict never escalates past them yelling at each other, and eventually the group of apes we've been following were forced to back away. And the purpose of this first part is to show that these apes were non-violent. They were vegetarian, so they didn't kill other animals. And even when something as essential as water was in danger of being lost, the apes still didn't resort to physical violence. However, this would soon change when this happened. The monolith appearing represents the triggering of evolution from ape into man. When this group of apes see the monolith appear in front of their shelter, they are initially scared of the monolith, but are quickly drawn in by their curiosity, and after touching the monolith, they are completely enthralled by the unknown it represents. After this encounter, we follow an ape playing around in the bones of dead animals. The ape picks a bone up and realizes that it can be used as a tool to help it. This transformation from being a victim of our environment into the master of our environment is quite literally a representation of human evolution. But this isn't just what makes us human. The ape man did not just use these bones as tools, he uses it as a weapon. We first see this when he uses the bone to kill tapirs for food, evolving from a vegetarian to a carnivore. However, his weapons were not just reserved for animals, he uses them against his own biological species as well. His group returns to the watering hole to once again contest it. As the other ape group partakes in the typical intimidation, the group of ape men use their weapons to beat the leader of the opposing group to death. And through this display of violence, the other group of apes backed off because of fear for their life. Since the time we turned from ape to human, from the very dawn of man, we have used violence against the other. Whether we use it against other species for food, or we use it against other groups in our own species. This shows that violence is inherent to humanity. And even after hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, that violence is still an inherent part of us. Kubrick shows us this by using a well-timed jump cut. After killing an enemy ape with his bone, the ape we've been following throws the bone into the air. After seeing the bone spin in the air several times, there's a jump cut to some sort of spacecraft. Initially, we think that this is just a clever way to do a time skip to the future, but it's actually a lot deeper than that. The spacecraft in this scene is actually an orbital nuclear weapon. The scene here shows us that even though we advanced so far in technology, humans have not mentally evolved past the ape men. Back then, we killed each other with bones for water holes. Now, we kill each other with modern weapons for our political and economic self-preservation. No matter the age, we will always use violence for personal motives. This philosophy will continue to our creations. HAL 9000, the sentient supercomputer, was created by humanity to aid us in our own personal ventures. However, the computer, once realizing that he would be discontinued due to him making mistakes in analysis, also turns to violence to keep himself alive. He killed all the crew members in hypersleep by cutting off their life support. Then, he sent the 2 awake astronauts out of the ship and killed one by cutting off his oxygen supply, and finally attempts to kill David Bauman by locking him out of the ship. The methods HAL 9000 used to kill the astronauts were not random. Every time he successfully killed an astronaut, he did so by cutting off a vital resource they needed to live. Whether he deliberately cut off all sustenance to the astronauts in hypersleep, or cut off the oxygen to the spacewalking astronauts, he killed others by denying them access to resources they needed to survive. This is a direct parallel to the ape men at the beginning of the movie, who used violence to cut off the water hole from the other tribe. In both cases, the party being violent did so because the violence was necessary to their survival. Kubrick was trying to say that violence is an inherent component of sentience, as all sentient beings in the movie use violence for self-preservation. Even our protagonist, David Bauman, uses a form of violence himself by essentially killing Hal when he deactivated him, once again doing so for his own self-preservation. So now let's move on to Evangelion. In Neon Genesis Evangelion, humanity also suffers from an inherent condition, but in Ava's case, it isn't violence, but loneliness. The show explicitly says that humanity is forever doomed to have barriers between our souls and to never be able to fully understand each other. So, humans would never be able to experience true companionship, cursed to live a life with loneliness. The loneliness is exemplified through the protagonist, Shinji Ikari. I mean, I don't really think I need a citation to prove this. The show makes it very obvious that he feels alone, in terms of familial relationships, friendships, and romantic relationships. And it's not necessarily because of any fault of his own, or because he wasn't that likable. It's because of the human condition that he is alone. There have been people who wanted to form close relationships with him throughout the duration of the show. However, because of their own mental issues and personalities, they were never able to healthily express their feelings for each other. The show calls this the hedgehog's dilemma. This is a metaphor for when someone with mental or emotional baggage attempts to form a close relationship with someone else. Due to their baggage, represented by the hedgehog's spines, they can't make close relationships with others, because they will hurt others due to their unresolved issues, like how a hedgehog will hurt others with its spines if it gets close to others. Basically, don't go into relationships expecting people to be your therapist. Fix your own issues first, before trying to form companionship with others. However, Evangelion takes this a step further by saying that since everybody has their own personal issues we go through by ourselves, we can never truly understand each other, therefore true companionship is impossible. Pretty depressing, but that's what the director thinks. So now we know that Evangelion thinks that humans suffer from an inherent negative condition, just like 2001. But does Evangelion have a counterpart to HAL 9000? Well, I believe it does. Now, it may seem ridiculous when I first say it, but I believe that Rei Ayanami is Evangelion's version of HAL 9000. Just listen. Both of them are artificial beings created by humanity for their own goals. Both of them are cold and emotionless, with the same flat voice, until the end of their respective stories. Both of them have multiple clones of themselves. And both of them finally gained their own free will and betrayed the organizations which created them, gaining emotions in the process.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It appears to have begun. Now, Rei, it's time to reunite me with Yui once more. What?
I will not be a puppet for you to control.
Rei!
And hell, you can say that both of them even have the same red eye color. Also, just like how HAL 9000 took on the violence of humanity, Rei also took on the loneliness of humanity. She just might possibly be the loneliest character on the show, even more so than Shinji. At least Shinji has friends in school, and also lives with other people at his home. Rei literally has no friends in school and lives alone in a dark and dirty apartment. She only has a connection with her creator, Gendo, only because Gendo wants to use her to start the Third Impact, as well as the fact that Gendo has an emotional connection to her due to the fact that she's a clone of his dead wife. But other than that, the emotion she feels the most is loneliness. We see this in episode 23 when she talks with the 16th Angel, Armisael.
This is pain. Yes. Do you feel this pain? This pain? No, it's different. Loneliness. Yes. Loneliness. Loneliness? I don't understand. You don't want to be by yourself, correct? We are many, but you are alone. You hate it, don't you? That is what it is to be lonely. That is what your mind is. It is what fills your soul. You are that sorrow.
Evolution is a huge theme in both 2001 and Evangelion. In 2001: A Space Odyssey, evolution occurs at every major plot point in the story. The first instance happens at the beginning of the story, in the Dawn of Man portion. After a monolith appears in front of a tribe of monkeys, the monkeys were able to make a technological leap by being able to make tools and weapons. When mankind finds the second monolith on the moon, we make another evolution by becoming the masters of space. Before we see the monolith, notice how space travel was clunky and uncomfortable for humans. But after our encounter with the monolith, our space travel becomes much more comfortable, even on huge expeditions such as the first mission to Jupiter we see in the movie. And finally, once Bauman finds the third monolith near Jupiter, he evolves into... well, we'll talk about that later. The point here is that throughout the movie, humanity is continuously evolving, and it always seems to be caused by these monoliths. Evolution is also a central concept in Evangelion. The entire end goal of the multiple organizations present in the series is to initiate the Third Impact, an event where humanity evolves past the suffering of loneliness into a being which will fulfill our need for companionship. And the one organization which pushes for Third Impact the hardest is Seele, who are represented in the show by, you guessed it, black monoliths. So in both pieces of media, we have monoliths trying to foster human evolution, and nearing the end of both stories, they do accomplish their goals. They do this by having the main character meet God. At the end of both stories, the main characters encounter what is essentially God. By doing this, they are able to undergo the final evolution into a being which can remove the inherent suffering of humanity. In 2001, Bauman arrives at Jupiter, where he finds yet another monolith. The monolith leads him into a stargate, where he goes through a very trippy sequence. This is the monolith showing him the truths of the universe and giving him complete knowledge and understanding of its processes. Initially, he is traumatized by his journey, but regardless of his initial reaction, he still becomes more enlightened by the end. He then finds himself in what looks to be like a manor, where time itself seems to be non-consistent. Bauman sees himself at various stages of his life, then realizing that the older version of himself he is seeing is actually now just him, since he is aging without perceiving time. Eventually, he's on his deathbed, and he looks up and sees the monolith in front of him. He reaches out, pointing at it, in a shot purposefully meant to mirror the creation of Adam, where man attempts to touch God. Bauman is then turned into what the director calls a Star Child, the next evolution of humanity. And while this isn't explicitly shown in the movie, in the script it says that the Star Child detonates all the orbital nuclear weapons so that humans can no longer use them against each other, representing that the arrival of the Star Child will end the inherent violence of humanity. Evangelion also has a similar ending. Shinji is used by Seele as an invocation object to start Third Impact. The actual process is too complex to explain briefly and ultimately irrelevant to the point that I'm making, so here it is simplified. The angels have a fruit of power, and the humans have the fruit of knowledge. When combined together, they hold enough power to become powerful enough to be like the god who created both angels and humans. As Shinji was the invocation object at the center of this, he ultimately makes the decision as to either start Third Impact or to leave humanity alive. Third Impact would result in him creating God, killing all humans, and bringing their souls into one being, removing the barriers between us that separate us in real life. Shinji is taking on a mind-bending journey, just like Bauman, but this one sees him reflect on his own life and the human condition. Shinji realizes that nobody will ever truly love him in his living life, and that the barrier separating our souls from each other will prevent true love. Therefore, he decides to kill everyone, as nobody ever loved him in the living world, and Third Impact is the only way he thinks he can feel companionship. And so, he initiates Third Impact, and all of humanity's souls are united as one inside of our Creator. Seems bad, but the scenes make it clear that the feeling inside of God is pure ecstasy. So you can say that Shinji transformed into a godlike being and ended the inherent human suffering of loneliness. But this is where the similarities between 2001 and Evangelion end, because they differ in the messages of their endings. 2001's ending is what I call the ideal ending. This is the one where the Star Child basically ends all human violence. It's a great fantasy, but that's all it is, a fantasy. It will never happen in real life, and humans will have to deal with our violent tendencies by ourselves. At first, it seems like Evangelion is also going for this ideal ending, but we can soon see that it turns into what I call a realistic ending. And I don't mean realistic as in it can actually happen, because basically everything nearing the end of Evangelion just becomes a giant trip. No, what I mean is that the message that it conveys is a realistic one. After starting Third Impact, Shinji has a change of heart. He realizes that lowering the barrier between souls isn't as freeing as it supposedly was, and that pain still existed in this world. His mother, as a stand-in for God here, tells him that being close with other people isn't the perfect solution to suffering like he idealized. She told him that loving someone also means that you share in the pain that they have, but that's okay because you have each other to work through it. That even though we'll never be able to truly understand each other, we have to accept that and enjoy our lives to the fullest. That we should also live for ourselves rather than focus on our relationships with others. Shinji realizes that this is a better way to live life than to just sit there with everyone else's souls. So he undoes the Third Impact and allows anyone to go back into their human forms if they wish to. And when he comes back, the first thing he is faced with is suffering, loneliness, and rejection. But rather than running away from that as he did in the past, he accepts that this is a part of life, but still tries to make the best of it. This is a much better moral of the story. Nowadays, with the internet, a lot of us turn to escapism to leave behind the problems of the real world. Evangelion tells us that such escapism will only make us feel worse in the long run, and that we should instead go out and face our problems with a positive attitude, even if it may make us feel bad, because it is still better than pretending those problems don't exist. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys see the similarities between these two pieces of media now, and I hope you enjoyed me explaining it. I know my uploads have been slowing down because of school, but I will try and get out as much as I can. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Have a great day.